On today's show, Apple shockingly listens to its audience, and also Mac Minis are coming. So today's video, because it is Monday, is basically taken from Mark Gurman's notes on his Powered Up newsletter, but with a bit of analysis added from me, then your questions at the end of the show, all makes sense. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, so let's get straight into it. First, shockingly, it seems like Apple has actually listened to noisy people and has added back the option for Safari having its address window at the top of the display rather than attached to the top of the keyboard, as in some of the earlier iOS 15 betas. Mark Gurman compares this to iPhone 4's AntennaGate, the "you're holding it wrong" issue, and how Apple then gave away cases and bumpers to solve it, and the return to ports and removal of the touch bar with the upcoming MacBook Pro redesigns. And I think this is an interesting little point to pick up. It is interesting that Apple is paying a lot more attention to the feedback that they're getting these days, and potentially with this next MacBook Pro, especially bringing back all of those ports that the Pro users really want to have back. Even though I think the vast majority of true Pro users probably use a Mac Pro, not a MacBook Pro. The MacBook Pro is kind of that middle of the road thing. If you are a photographer that's out on the road, I see you using it, but most photographers would then have a desktop computer that they would plug into because that's got their reference style monitors and all that kind of thing. The same with video creators. If they are the true high-end professionals, they're probably using a Mac Pro. They're probably not using a MacBook Pro to do the next Pixar movie. Now, this is my kind of slightly cynical take on things. I understand. Pro is, of course, entirely subjective. For example, we are shooting this video on an iPhone Pro. I'm not in any way a professional YouTuber. I am one of the kind of bottom tier YouTubers that kind of uses their phone to make their videos with, and there aren't many creative professionals out there that use an iPhone as their primary device for cinematography. However, for using it as a professional that works in social media, for example, to be able to grab footage very quickly and be able to turn that into very quick posts, it absolutely makes sense. The cameras are incredibly good these days. Are they comparable still to a DSLR? Probably not in terms of higher end video, but certainly getting that way in terms of stills photography, given the right conditions at least. So I'm not opposed to Apple obviously listening to their audience. However, I also do have an element of me that thinks, you know what, Apple has done so well in the past. If they'd listened to feedback before products were released, they wouldn't have ever brought out the iPad. That just wouldn't have happened because people didn't particularly want tablet computers. They wanted netbooks. So we would have ended up with Apple netbooks that would have been just a compromised design. And when it comes down to it, listening to your audience, never a bad thing, but also deciding which parts you want to actually react to is also a pretty good thing. I personally like the redesign with the lower address bar, but that is still an option. It is actually just allowing you to choose which one you want to do. Now, I think that most people will probably go with the top address bar purely because they're used to it, but at least there's an option there to move it now. Moving on from that, he then mentions the Pixel 6 is on the way from Google and reports that the flagship feature, the Google-designed custom Tensor chip, is actually a Samsung chip. And sure enough, a quick search online reveals that it looks like it is a rebrand of the Exynos 9855. Now, this kind of makes sense that Samsung would be making the SOCs for Google if TSMC is fully booked out, and they are. Samsung has probably got the best fabs around that are available, although according to AndroidHeadlines.com, which I have honestly never read before and I have no idea of their reliability, the chip will be substantially behind the next flagship Exynos or Qualcomm Snapdragon chips, so don't expect stellar performance in the Google Tensors. Then Mark moves into his subscriber-only Q&A section, where he was asked if the AirPods Pro would be announced this fall, what's going on with the Mac Mini M1x, and whether the next iPhone would have in-display Touch ID. And because there is a whole ecosystem of Apple news out there, we obviously have the answers to these things. So the first one, AirPods Pro, he's not expecting until next year, which I think we all kind of already knew. The Mac Mini with M1x, he is expecting in the next several months, which is a little bit of a breath of fresh air. There's a lot of talk that it may not be released until next year alongside the M2 MacBook Air, but it does look like he's expecting it in the next several months. Of course, the word several, as usual with Mark, means that it's undisprovable, which means it's very difficult to give a mark against his track record for saying next several months, because there's no defined number that means. And of course, the iPhone Touch ID in display, it looks like has been pushed off until at least the iPhone 14. But coming back to that Mac Mini news, the higher end Mac Mini with M1x SoC expected to arrive within the next several months and replace the higher end Intel Mac Mini models, which, let's be honest, are only really higher end in terms of port count and I guess RAM capacity. The 10-core M1X inside should be substantially faster than any of the existing Intel and Apple Silicon models, with double the performance cores and potentially 4 times the graphics cores. My only slight confusion is the distinct lack of a headphone port in the new model, given the poor quality of the internal speaker, which is really only intended for accessibility reasons during setup, so presumably the intent is to carry all of the audio via HDMI or USB-C to the monitor, which could then presumably pass to external speakers if required. Now, that seems a little bit convoluted, but assuming the pricing on these is reasonable, i.e. around the current higher end start price of $10.99, I may well be opening my wallet. But let me know down in the comments which products from Apple's release schedule this year you are most excited for. I know most of you will be MacBook Pros. And into our next segment, which is iCave Answers. This is where you get to ask any questions that you feel like down in the comments section. You use hashtag iCave Answers and you get your answer right here on the show. So first up, Andrew Hornback. iCave Answers. I just resurrected and upgraded a 2007 MacBook Pro 17-inch with the 1920 by 1200 display, 2.6 GHz chip, running Mavericks, replaced the hard drive with an SSD, added an adapter to go from DVI to HDMI, and they work great. I also picked up a 4GB stick to expand it out to 6GB of RAM, and the system's only reading that DIMM as 2GB. Is there a trick I'm missing? Unfortunately not. The issue here is that I think the 2007 MacBook Pro was probably a 32-bit processor. That would be my main guess, and that would mean that it can only address up to 4GB of RAM. I could be wrong on this, so let me know down in the comments, guys, if you know something that I don't. But other than that, I feel like that's probably the limitation that you are bouncing up against. Lit8 asks, iCave Answers, what do you think of iOS 6 and skeuomorphism? I think it was important at its time, but I don't think it's something that we need anymore. So when the first iPhones came out, people weren't used to using smartphones at all and didn't really know what to do with them. So having images on the screen, having buttons that look like things from the real world made a lot of sense for introducing people to new features. However, there's actually no reason, and it just adds visual clutter. I much prefer the current version where you've got a much cleaner interface rather than having all that stitched leather nonsense going on. Josh, iCave Answers, if you could be the director of Apple for a day, what new technology would you launch? Now, the big issue here is it's very difficult to develop an entirely new technology in a day. However, if I was going into Apple, the strategic change that I would make would be probably to introduce a MacBook SE of some sort, or a Mac Mini SE. Either way, I think that would be really cool. The other thing that I think Apple really needs is to revisit the space of Wi-Fi networks, because previously we had the Airport models, we had the Airport Express, Airport Extreme, and the time capsules for backups. Now, I think it would be quite interesting from Apple's privacy point of view to offer a time capsule style drive that sits at home and works as a kind of personal secure version of Dropbox, so you could put whatever hard drive you want inside it or SSD inside it and be able to access that from the web very easily. I know there are services out there that can do it, but it's also one of those things that is not as easy to set up as you would probably like. On the other hand, I think around the house, Wi-Fi networks generally suck. There are some great mesh networks out there, but I think Apple would have the opportunity to not only do their own mesh network, but bringing Wi-Fi 6E quite quickly, and also using all of your Apple devices as access points. So you could bounce the signal between your Macs and your Apple TVs and your HomePods and everything else to just give really great coverage for the entire house. Master Kavalchak asks, I drink Answers decaf coffee, hate or nay? Real coffee only, I'm afraid. Much like alcohol-free beer, decaf coffee just doesn't taste right. It loses some of that bitterness that I really enjoy. The Duke of Kidderminster asks, iCave Answers, what is your least favourite Apple product? Scott Forstall. Now, I'm trying to think now, probably the The one that I think is the most unnecessary is the MagSafe Duo charger. It's one of these things that's like, it's $129, and the 2 chargers that it incorporates cost less than that individually. And I think we did something on one of the shows when it was first released, where I got a piece of cardboard and stuck the 2 chargers to it, and it worked out to be like $60 cheaper or something like that. Cario 54321 asks, iCave answers, how many generations do you think that the iPhone Nano would have lasted if it had come out? Let's assume a full 2011 release, and to tie into this, do you think there will be a 2022 mini iPhone if this year has one? Okay, I think if they were to have brought out an iPhone Nano, it might have changed the way that the industry went a little bit. It depends what you want to put into this phone, but if you wanted to have good video recording and you wanted to have fast connectivity, even if you're not using it for massive amounts of web browsing and things because the phone would have been so tiny, then the biggest issue that you're going to run up against, which we've had the same issue with the iPhone 12 mini, is battery life. Because if your whole phone is so small, then you can only put a very small cell inside it, and that is going to cause you some big issues when it comes to recording high quality video and being able to store it and being able to dissipate heat and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I think it probably didn't come out for a good reason, probably because they couldn't actually make it a viable product. In terms of the iPhone 14 mini, I guess, in 2022, it already looks like Apple is planning to do a iPhone 12 and 12 Max, and then a Pro and a Pro Max. So it looks like they are eliminating that size. And Steed Scotia asks, iCave answers, Dave, with the Magic Keyboard as well as third-party versions, why won't Apple move the front-facing iPad camera to the horizontal side? Have they not been zooming over the last 18 months? You would think they have noticed by now. I think the reason that they're not doing that is because the vast majority of people, when they make FaceTime calls, especially, probably use it in portrait mode, because most of the people would be on an iPhone talking to them. And if you hold your iPad in horizontal mode while someone else is talking to you in vertical mode, it's a really bad experience because, you know, everything gets letterboxed and it looks horrible. So I think the main reason is that FaceTime is an iPhone first technology. I think the use of center stage has probably helped a lot. But also, if you put it on one of the sides, which side do you choose? Left side or right side? The whole point of the iPad is that it's not supposed to have a top and a bottom. However, it makes it a lot easier to find the right side if you've got it on one of the shorter sides where you've also got your power buttons and all that sort of thing. So I think that's probably the main reason. But yeah, I understand the frustrations. I feel like maybe they should have an extra camera built into the Magic Keyboard case. That might be a decent idea, so that when you dock it, this is popping over the top, and you could actually have a better quality camera in there too. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Evan Rogers asks, iCave answers, what would cause you to ditch Apple for Android and Windows full time, and which products would you use? They'd have to get pretty terrible if Android and Windows was going to overtake them, to be completely honest. So I don't know what I would, what scenario would make me have to do it. Yeah, if Apple suddenly went out of business, maybe I'd have to put up with that crap. And in all honesty, what devices would I use? I haven't got a clue, because I don't even follow that stuff, because I just don't find it interesting at all. Josh asks, iCave answers, do you know the exact date when iOS 15 is coming out? No, I don't know the exact dates, but in general, we will have the Apple event. We will then have the iPhones go on sale the Friday of the week of the event. So I think we're getting the Apple event on the 14th of September. That's my prediction. Has been for a long time. So that would be the Tuesday, so Wednesday the 15th, Thursday the 16th, Friday the 17th, that's when they go on sale, and it will be a week after that, so probably Tuesday the 21st, I think, was probably the date that the iOS 15 will drop publicly, but of course, you can just install the public beta. It's pretty good. So that's it for this week's show. So that's it for today's show, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.